The satellite phone crackled to life at 0347 hours, cutting through the desert silence like a rusty blade. I was hunched over a camp stove in the mess tent, flipping eggs for the morning shift when that familiar number lit up the screen. Home. Texas. My wife, Heather. Jack? Her voice sounded strange, distant. Not the usual warmth I'd grown accustomed to during these overseas calls. Hey, sweetheart. You're up early. I glanced at my watch, calculating the time difference. Everything okay with Mason? A pause. Too long. In my line of work, military contractor, food service for forward operating bases, you learn to read silences. This one felt loaded. Jack, I need to tell you something. Another pause. Your mother passed away yesterday. The spatula slipped from my hand, clattering onto the metal counter. Mom. 72 years old, stubborn as a mule, tougher than most soldiers I'd served alongside. She'd been battling pneumonia for weeks, but I thought she was getting better. What happened? Her lungs gave out. The hospital called me around midnight. Jack, I'm sorry, but I'm coming home. No. The word came out sharp, final. Jack, you can't. The contract. Forget the contract. My mother is gone. I need to be there for the funeral, for Mason, for you. We'll handle it. We don't need... She stopped herself, but I heard something in the background. A man's voice. Low, familiar. Heather? Who's there? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Nobody. Look, Jack, just finish your tour. We've got everything under control here. Mason's fine. I'm handling the arrangements. The line went quiet except for some shuffling sounds. Then I heard it clearly. A man's laugh. Deep, rough around the edges. I knew that laugh. Kyle Martin, my old high school buddy, the guy who'd stood as best man at our wedding 12 years ago. Heather, put Kyle on the phone. Kyle's not... I heard him. Put him on. More shuffling, whispered voices. Then Kyle's voice came through, cocky as ever. Hey, Jack. Sorry about your mom, man. She was a tough old bird. What are you doing at my house at 6 a.m? Just helping Heather with some stuff. You know, heavy lifting. Things a man needs to handle. The way he said man made my jaw clench. I'm flying home today. Jack, listen to me. Heather's voice again, but she sounded panicked now. You can't just abandon your responsibilities. We're managing fine without... The line went silent. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I'd been overseas for 8 months, working a lucrative contract that would set our family up financially. The plan was simple. Finish the year-long deployment, come home with enough money to finally buy that house Heather had been wanting. Give Mason the stability he deserved. But now Mom was gone, and my wife was acting like my presence at the funeral would be an inconvenience. I grabbed my gear and headed for the commander's tent. Time to go home. The flight from Kuwait to Dallas took 18 hours with layovers. 18 hours to think, to worry, to imagine the worst. By the time I landed at DFW, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Grief makes people act strange. Heather was probably just overwhelmed, trying to handle everything while I was halfway around the world. Kyle helping out made sense. He'd always been reliable despite his rough edges. He owned an auto repair shop in town, had never married, no kids. Of course, he'd step up when his old friend's family needed help. I caught a cab home to our subdivision in Cedar Creek, a middle-class neighborhood where American flags hung from every other porch, and neighbors still waved when you drove by. The house looked the same, red brick ranch style, Heather's flower beds perfectly maintained, Mason's bicycle abandoned on the front lawn. But something felt off as I approached the front door. The living room curtains were drawn tight, unusual for a Thursday afternoon. Heather's car was in the driveway, along with Kyle's black pickup truck. I used my key, expecting to surprise them. The house was quiet, except for muffled sounds coming from upstairs. I dropped my duffel bag and called out, "Heather, I'm home!" The sounds stopped immediately. Footsteps, hushed voices. "Jack?" Heather's voice drifted down from the second floor. "You're early!" "Caught an earlier connection. Where's Mason?" "School. He'll be home around 4. More footsteps. A door closing. Kyle appeared at the top of the stairs, fully dressed but looking disheveled. His hair was messed up, his shirt wrinkled. "Jack! Good to see you, man!" He bounded down the stairs with that easy confidence he'd always possessed. "Sorry about your mom. The whole town's gonna miss her." "Thanks." I studied his face, looking for something I couldn't quite name. "What were you guys doing up there?" "Helping Heather move some furniture around. Your mom left some heavy pieces, and Heather wanted to rearrange the guest room before the funeral." It sounded reasonable, logical, but my instincts, honed by years of military service, were screaming that something wasn't right. Heather appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful but flustered. "Jack, honey, I wish you'd called first. I would have picked you up from the airport. I wanted to surprise you." I climbed the stairs, reaching for her. She accepted my embrace but felt stiff, distant. "I missed you." "I missed you too." The words sounded automatic, rehearsed. Kyle cleared his throat from downstairs. "I should probably head out. Let you two catch up. Jack, the funeral's tomorrow at 2. First Baptist. Your mom would have wanted it simple." "Kyle planned everything," Heather said quickly. "He's been such a help." I should have been grateful, should have thanked him for stepping up when I couldn't be there. Instead, I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. "I appreciate it, Kyle. Really." "No problem, man. That's what friends do." After he left, Heather and I stood in our bedroom, an awkward silence stretching between us. She kept fidgeting with her robe, avoiding eye contact. "You look good," I said, trying to bridge the gap. "Different. Have you been working out?" "A little. Yoga classes with some of the other lawyers from the firm." She worked at Henderson and Associates, a mid-sized law practice downtown. Good money, respectable clients, partnership track, everything she'd worked for since law school. "How's Mason handling everything? About Mom?" "He's okay. Kids are resilient, you know? Kyle's been taking him to baseball practice, helping with homework." Kyle again. Always Kyle. I unpacked while Heather showered, trying to shake the paranoid thoughts creeping into my head. But when I opened the closet to hang up my clothes, I noticed things had been rearranged. Heather's side had expanded, taking up more space. Some of my clothes had been moved to the guest room closet, and there was a cologne scent I didn't recognize. Expensive. Masculine. The shower was still running when I heard Heather's phone buzz on the nightstand. A text message. The screen lit up automatically, and I saw the sender's name. Kyle. The preview showed just the beginning. "Can't wait until tomorrow night when Jack goes back to..." I reached for the phone, but the screen went dark. By the time I figured out her passcode, Mason's birthday, same as always, the message was gone. Deleted. My hands were shaking as I set the phone back down. Mom's funeral was everything she would have hated. Too many flowers, too many tears, too many people who barely knew her pretending to care. She'd been a simple woman, worked at the county clerk's office for 30 years, raised me alone after Dad left, never asked for much from life. I sat in the front pew with Heather and Mason, trying to focus on the pastor's words about eternal rest and heavenly peace. But my attention kept drifting to Kyle, who sat directly behind us, with his hand resting on the back of our pew, his fingers occasionally brushing against Heather's shoulder. Mason leaned against me during the service, his 10-year-old frame still small enough to fit perfectly under my arm. He was taking it hard. Mom had been his favorite babysitter, the one who taught him to fish and let him stay up late watching old westerns. "Dad?" he whispered during the closing prayer. "Are you staying home now?" For a while, buddy. At least until after Christmas. I felt Heather stiffen beside me. We hadn't discussed my plans yet, but I'd already made the decision during the flight home. The overseas contract could wait. My family needed me. After the service, we drove to Oakwood Cemetery for the burial. The November air was crisp, with gray clouds threatening rain. Perfect weather for saying goodbye. Kyle appeared at my elbow as we stood graveside. Your mom was proud of you, Jack. Always talked about her son serving overseas, making good money to support his family. She said that? All the time. Especially these last few months when she got sick. Kept saying how lucky Heather and Mason were to have a man who'd sacrifice everything for them. There was something in his tone that made me look at him sideways. An edge that hadn't been there before. I'm thinking about staying home for a while, taking a break from the overseas work. Kyle's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Really? That's a big decision. Financially, I mean. We'll manage? Sure, but Heather's got her career to think about. Partnership track, right? Those law firm politics can be brutal. She needs stability, security, the kind that comes from a steady income. I was about to respond when Heather appeared beside us, linking her arm through mine. What are you two talking about? Jack's thinking about staying home, Kyle said before I could answer. Oh. Heather's grip on my arm tightened. We should discuss that later, privately. The reception was held at the church fellowship hall. Casseroles and condolences, the usual small-town ritual of communal grieving. I found myself watching Heather and Kyle throughout the afternoon, noting the way they seemed to communicate without words. A glance here, a subtle nod there, like they shared some private understanding. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, cornered me near the dessert table. Jack, honey, I'm so sorry about your mother. She was a saint. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You know, it's been so nice having Kyle around to help Heather while you've been away. Such a good friend. He's been there almost every day, helping with Mason, keeping an eye on things. Every day? Oh, yes. Sometimes his truck's there when I get up for my morning walk. Sometimes it's there when I go to bed. Heather's been so lucky to have that kind of support. The casserole in my mouth turned to sawdust. His truck's been there overnight? Well, I wouldn't want to gossip, but yes. Quite often, actually. I just assumed he was helping with repairs or something. You know how these old houses can be. I excused myself and found a quiet corner where I could think. Every instinct I possessed was telling me that my wife was having an affair with my best friend. But I needed proof. Real evidence, not just paranoid suspicions and nosy neighbor observations. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, after Mason had gone to bed, Heather announced she needed to run to the office to catch up on some work that had piled up during the funeral preparations. I'll come with you, I offered. Haven't seen your office since they remodeled. No, that's okay. It'll be boring lawyer stuff. Why don't you relax, watch some TV? You've had a long day. She kissed my cheek and grabbed her purse, but she left her phone charging on the kitchen counter. A mistake that would prove costly. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway, then picked up the phone. Still the same passcode. Still the same trusting wife who never imagined her husband would snoop through her private messages. What I found made my stomach turn. Months of text exchanges with Kyle. Intimate messages that left nothing to the imagination. Photos I never wanted to see. Plans for secret meetings while I was overseas. Complaints about my absence, my lack of ambition, my failure to provide the lifestyle she deserved. But the worst message was from 3 days ago, right after she'd gotten news of Mom's passing. Kyle. This could be perfect timing. If Jack comes home for the funeral, we can tell him together. Get it over with. Heather. Not yet. I need more time to figure out the finances, the house, Mason's custody. I can't afford to make any mistakes. Kyle. How much more time? I'm tired of sneaking around. Heather. Just until after the holidays. Let him grieve his mother. Then we'll make our move. Besides, he'll probably go back overseas anyway. He always chooses work over family. I set the phone down with trembling hands. My wife wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me. And she was using my mother's passing as a strategic opportunity. The front door opened, and Heather walked in carrying takeout bags from Murphy's Diner. "I brought dinner," she called out. "Figured neither of us felt like cooking tonight." I met her in the kitchen, studying her face as she unpacked fried chicken and mashed potatoes. She looked relaxed, almost cheerful, not like a woman who'd just spent 2 hours at the office working on legal briefs. "How was work?" I asked. "Productive. Caught up on most of the backlog." She handed me a plate. "Tomorrow I thought we could go through your mother's house, start sorting through her things." "Sounds good." We ate in relative silence, making small talk about Mason's school and the funeral arrangements. Normal conversation between a normal married couple, except nothing about this was normal anymore. After dinner, Heather excused herself for a bath. I heard the water running upstairs while I loaded the dishwasher and tried to process everything I'd learned. My wife was cheating on me with my best friend. They were planning to end my marriage after the holidays, and they'd been carrying on this affair for months while I was overseas, earning money to support the family that was already planning to abandon me. The rage hit me like a physical force, not the hot, explosive anger of a bar fight, but something colder, more calculating, the kind of fury that burns slow and steady, building pressure until it finds a way to escape. I'd been a fool, a naive, trusting fool who believed in marriage vows and friendship loyalty and all the other fairy tales that apparently didn't apply to real life. But I wasn't going to stay a fool. I was going to make them pay. I spent the next 3 days playing the role of the grieving son and devoted husband while conducting my own private investigation. Years of military training had taught me patience, observation, and the importance of gathering intelligence before taking action. Heather went back to work on Monday, leaving me alone with my thoughts and unlimited access to our home. I started in our bedroom, searching through drawers and closets with the methodical precision of a professional. In Heather's jewelry box, hidden beneath a tangle of necklaces, I found a prepaid credit card I'd never seen before. The statements, when I called the customer service number, showed charges at expensive restaurants, a boutique hotel downtown, and Victoria's Secret. All dates when I'd been overseas. Her laptop proved even more revealing. Despite her legal training, Heather had been careless with her digital security. Her browser history showed searches for divorce attorneys, Texas property law, and child custody guidelines. She'd even bookmarked several articles about military contractor income and asset division. But the most damaging evidence came from her email account. I found correspondence with 3 different law firms, all specializing in family law. She'd been shopping for representation, looking for someone who could maximize her settlement while minimizing my access to Mason. One attorney had responded with a detailed strategy memo outlining how to document abandonment and emotional neglect as grounds for divorce. The plan was sophisticated and ruthless. Heather intended to argue that my overseas work constituted abandonment of family responsibilities. She would claim emotional distress, citing my failure to prioritize family over money. Kyle would serve as a character witness, testifying to my neglect and his own efforts to fill the void I'd created. They'd even discussed Mason's custody, with Kyle positioning himself as a potential stepfather figure who'd already established a relationship with my son. Reading those emails felt like being gutted with a rusty knife. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my life and steal my family. On Tuesday, I followed Kyle to his auto shop on the outskirts of town. Martin's Automotive occupied a converted warehouse surrounded by junked cars and rusted machinery. Kyle had inherited the business from his father and built it into a profitable operation, specializing in custom modifications and restoration work. I parked across the street and watched through binoculars as Kyle worked on a classic Mustang. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who worked with his hands, comfortable in his element. Occasionally, he'd step outside to smoke a cigarette or take a phone call. At 12:30, Heather's BMW pulled into the lot. I watched my wife get out of her car, dressed in a business suit that hugged her curves in all the right places. Kyle emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a shop rag, and they embraced like lovers who'd been separated for weeks instead of hours. They disappeared into the office trailer behind the main building. Through the windows, I could see their silhouettes moving together, and I didn't need binoculars to understand what was happening. 25 minutes later, Heather emerged, looking disheveled but satisfied. Kyle walked her to the car, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. They kissed goodbye like newlyweds. I followed Heather back to her law firm, then drove home to pick up Mason from school. My son climbed into the passenger seat with his usual 10-year-old energy, chattering about his day and asking when we could visit Grandma's house to look through her things. "Dad, are you okay? You look sad." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Mason had Heather's dark hair but my green eyes, and right now those eyes were filled with concern for his father. "I'm fine, buddy. Just missing Grandma." "Me too. But Kyle says she's in heaven now, watching over us." "Kyle says that?" "Yeah. He talks about her sometimes when he helps with my homework. He says Grandma would want us to be happy, even though she's gone." I felt my jaw clench. "Kyle helps with your homework?" "Uh-huh. He's really good at math. And he taught me how to throw a curveball. Mom says he's like a second dad." The words hit me like a physical blow. Kyle wasn't just stealing my wife. He was positioning himself to replace me entirely. And Mason, innocent and trusting, was already accepting him as a father figure. That night, after Mason went to bed, I confronted Heather in our bedroom. "We need to talk." She was sitting at her vanity, removing her makeup with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. "About what?" "About us. About our marriage." Her hand paused for just a moment before continuing. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean the distance between us. The way you've been acting since I got home. Like you don't want me here." Heather set down her makeup remover and turned to face me. "Jack, you've been gone for 8 months. People change. Relationships evolve. Maybe we both need time to readjust." "Is there someone else?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. Heather's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear? Guilt? Relief? What kind of question is that? The kind a husband asks when his wife acts like a stranger. "Jack, you're grieving. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you should consider going back to work, getting back into your routine. The distraction might help." She was deflecting, turning the conversation back to my supposed emotional instability. Classic lawyer tactics. "I'm not going back overseas." "What?" "I'm staying home, taking a local job, being the husband and father I should have been all along." The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw panic flash across her face before she recovered her composure. "That's a big decision. We should discuss the financial implications." "I don't care about the money." "Well, I do." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "Jack, we have responsibilities, a mortgage, Mason's education, retirement planning. You can't just abandon a lucrative career because you're having an emotional crisis." Emotional crisis? Grief can make people act irrationally, make impulsive decisions they'll regret later. I stared at my wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in our 12-year marriage. She wasn't concerned about my emotional well-being or our family's stability. She was worried that my presence would complicate her exit strategy. "You're right," I said finally. "Grief does make people act irrationally, but it also clarifies what's really important." I left her sitting at the vanity, and went downstairs to the kitchen, where I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and began planning my revenge. The opportunity presented itself on Friday afternoon when Heather announced she was attending a mandatory continuing education seminar in Austin over the weekend. It's last minute, I know, but the state bar requires these credits for license renewal. I'll drive down Saturday morning, attend the sessions, stay overnight, and be back Sunday evening. She delivered this information while packing an overnight bag, not making eye contact. The lies came so easily now that I wondered how long she'd been practicing deception. Want me to come with you? Make it a weekend getaway? No, it'll be all legal boring stuff. Besides, someone needs to stay with Mason. Of course. Mason was the perfect excuse for keeping me home while she spent the weekend with Kyle. I helped her load the car, playing the supportive husband role. Drive safe. Call when you get there. I will. She kissed my cheek, the gesture feeling as cold as winter rain. After she left, I called Mrs. Patterson and asked if she could watch Mason for a few hours Saturday evening. I need to take care of some business related to Mom's estate. Of course, honey. Mason can have dinner with Harold and me. That boy needs some normalcy after everything he's been through. Saturday morning, I drove to an electronics store in the next town over and purchased several items with cash: a digital voice recorder, a GPS tracking device, and a high-resolution camera with telephoto lens. Then I stopped at a hardware store for lockpicks and other tools I might need. By noon, I was parked outside Kyle's auto shop, watching and waiting. Kyle's truck was there, along with 2 customer vehicles, but no sign of my wife's BMW. I used the telephoto lens to scout the property, noting the security cameras and planning my approach. At 2:15, Heather's car pulled into the lot. I watched her park behind the building, out of sight from the main road. She'd changed clothes since leaving home. Gone was the conservative business attire, replaced by jeans and a low-cut sweater that emphasized her figure. Kyle emerged from the garage and swept her into his arms, spinning her around like they were starring in some romantic movie. They disappeared into his office trailer, and I knew I had a window of opportunity. I circled around to the back of the property, staying low and using the junked cars for cover. The rear of Kyle's truck was unlocked. Small-town trust that would prove to be his downfall. I planted the GPS tracker inside the wheel well and attached the voice recorder to the underside of the trailer, positioning it near the office window. Then I retreated to my observation point and waited. For the next 3 hours, I documented their affair with methodical precision. Photos of them together, timestamps, detailed notes about their behavior, evidence that would prove invaluable in divorce proceedings. But I wasn't planning on divorce. I was planning something much more satisfying. At 5:30, they emerged from the trailer looking relaxed and satisfied. Kyle loaded 2 overnight bags into his truck while Heather transferred her things from the BMW. They were going somewhere together, probably the boutique hotel downtown that had appeared on her secret credit card statements. I followed at a safe distance as they drove to the Riverside Inn, a romantic bed and breakfast that catered to couples seeking privacy. They checked in using Kyle's name, and I watched from the parking lot as they carried their bags to a second-floor room overlooking the river. Perfect. I had them exactly where I wanted them. That evening, while Mason was safely at the Pattersons' house, I returned to Kyle's auto shop. The security system was basic, more for insurance purposes than actual protection. I bypassed it easily and let myself into the office trailer. Kyle's filing cabinet contained a treasure trove of information. Tax records showing unreported income, invoices for parts that had never been delivered, correspondence with suppliers that suggested various forms of fraud. Kyle had been running several scams through his business, skimming money and cheating customers. But the real prize was his personal computer. Kyle's password was pathetically simple, his birth year combined with his high school football jersey number. His email account contained months of correspondence with Heather, but also something more interesting: messages with other women. Kyle wasn't just cheating with my wife. He was cheating on my wife. I found explicit photos and messages with at least 3 other women, including Jennifer Walsh, the wife of a prominent local businessman. Kyle was apparently running a regular rotation of affairs, with Heather being just one of several married women he was manipulating. I copied everything to a flash drive, then used Kyle's computer to send a few strategic emails. Anonymous messages to the husbands of his other conquests, complete with photographic evidence. Messages to the IRS reporting suspected tax fraud. Messages to his biggest customers, alerting them to his business practices. By the time I finished, Kyle Martin's life was about to become very complicated, but I wasn't done yet. I drove to our house and let myself into Heather's home office. Her computer contained draft divorce papers, hidden in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2019. She'd been more thorough than I'd expected, documenting every asset, every account, every piece of property we owned. According to her calculations, she expected to receive 60% of our marital assets, plus alimony and child support. She'd even researched the value of my military pension and overseas contractor benefits. The woman I'd married, the mother of my child, was planning to financially destroy me while stealing my son and replacing me with my former best friend. I printed copies of everything, then composed my own email. A detailed message to the senior partners at Henderson & Associates, documenting Heather's affair and her use of company resources to plan her divorce strategy. I included photos, email exchanges, and credit card records showing her midday liaisons during work hours. Legal firms took a dim view of associates who brought scandal to their practice. Heather's partnership track was about to hit a major roadblock. Sunday morning, I retrieved the voice recorder from Kyle's trailer and listened to hours of recorded conversation. Most of it was exactly what I'd expected, intimate moments between two people who thought they were safe from discovery. But the last recording, from Saturday evening, contained something that made my hands shake with rage. Heather's voice. "I almost feel sorry for him sometimes. He's so clueless, so trusting, like a puppy that keeps coming back no matter how badly you treat it." Kyle's laugh. Jack was always naive. Even in high school, he believed whatever people told him. Remember when we convinced him that Sarah Mitchell wanted to go to prom with him? You were cruel to him even then. He made it easy. Some people are born to be used, Heather. Jack's one of them. Good thing for us. What about Mason? I worry about how this will affect him. Kids adapt. He already sees me as more of a father figure than Jack. By the time the divorce is final, he'll barely remember what it was like before. And if Jack fights for custody? He won't. He's too honorable, too concerned about doing the right thing. He'll convince himself that Mason's better off with us, that he's being noble by stepping aside. You really think so? I know so. Jack's predictable. Always has been. He'll be hurt, he'll be angry. But in the end, he'll do whatever he thinks is best for Mason, even if it destroys him. I turned off the recorder and sat in my truck, staring at Kyle's auto shop. They weren't just betraying me. They were counting on my decency to make their betrayal easier. They expected me to be the noble, self-sacrificing fool who would step aside for the sake of my son's happiness. They were wrong. I wasn't the same naive kid they'd manipulated in high school. I wasn't the trusting husband who'd spent 8 months overseas while they destroyed my marriage. I was something else now, something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. I was a man with nothing left to lose and all the skills necessary to make them pay for their betrayal. The game was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp November air that makes everything seem sharper, more focused. I woke before dawn and lay in bed listening to Heather's breathing, studying her face in the dim light filtering through our bedroom curtains. She looked peaceful, innocent even, like the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago, before law school hardened her edges and ambition consumed her heart. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for what I was about to do. Almost. Heather left for work at her usual time, kissing my cheek and reminding me to pick up Mason from soccer practice at 6. Normal domestic routine, as if our marriage wasn't built on lies and betrayal. "I'll probably be late tonight," she said, adjusting her suit jacket in the hallway mirror. "Big case coming up, lots of preparation." "Of course." I smiled, playing my role perfectly. "I'll handle dinner and homework." After she left, I spent the morning making phone calls. First to the editor of the Cedar Creek Gazette, our local newspaper. Small-town papers thrived on scandal, and I had enough scandal to sell papers for weeks. "Mr. Thompson, this is Jack Price. I have a story you might be interested in. Local businessman involved in tax fraud and multiple affairs with prominent citizens' wives." "That's quite an accusation, Mr. Price. Do you have evidence?" "Photographs, financial records, recorded conversations. Everything you'd need for a front-page story." We arranged to meet that afternoon. Next, I called the 3 husbands whose wives were having affairs with Kyle. Each conversation was brief and devastating. "Mr. Walsh? You don't know me, but I have information about your wife Jennifer that you need to see." By noon, I'd set several fires that would soon become an inferno. The afternoon meeting with the newspaper editor went exactly as planned. Bob Thompson was a veteran journalist who recognized a legitimate story when he saw one. The evidence I provided was overwhelming: financial fraud, tax evasion, adultery involving multiple prominent families. "This will destroy several marriages," Thompson warned me. "Are you sure you want to go this route? Once this publishes, there's no taking it back." "I'm sure. What about your own marriage? Your wife's involved in this." "My marriage ended the moment she decided to betray me. Now I'm just making it official." The story would run in Wednesday's edition, giving me time to prepare for the aftermath. That evening, I picked up Mason from soccer practice and took him to dinner at Murphy's Diner. We sat in a corner booth, eating burgers and talking about his day. Normal father-son time that felt precious, now that I knew how limited it might be. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that?" "Kids at school are talking. Tommy Patterson heard his mom telling his dad that you and Mom were having problems. Small towns. No secrets stayed buried for long. Mason, your mom and I are going through a difficult time, but no matter what happens between us, I want you to know that I love you more than anything in this world." "More than your job overseas?" "Much more. That job was supposed to help our family, but I realize now that being away from you was the biggest mistake I ever made." Mason nodded solemnly, processing information that no 10-year-old should have to handle. "What about Kyle? Mom says he might become my stepdad." The words felt like broken glass in my chest. "What do you think about that?" "He's okay, I guess. He knows a lot about cars and baseball. But he's not you, Dad. I don't want a stepdad. I want my real dad." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You'll always have your real dad, Mason. No matter what happens, that will never change." We drove home in comfortable silence, both of us lost in thought. Heather's car was already in the driveway, which surprised me. She'd said she'd be working late. Inside, I found her pacing the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked agitated, almost panicked. "I don't care what it costs," she was saying. "Fix it. Make it go away." She noticed me and quickly ended the call. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine. Just work stuff." But her hands were shaking as she set down the phone. Over the next 2 days, I watched my carefully laid plans unfold like dominoes falling in sequence. Tuesday morning brought the first casualties. Jennifer Walsh's husband confronted Kyle at his auto shop, resulting in a public altercation that required police intervention. By afternoon, 2 more angry husbands had shown up, and Kyle's business was effectively shut down while he dealt with the chaos. The IRS audit notification arrived Tuesday evening, along with complaints from several customers who'd discovered they'd been overcharged for parts and labor. But the real devastation came Wednesday morning when the Cedar Creek Gazette hit newsstands. "Local businessman at center of scandal," screamed the headline, with a front-page photo of Kyle and Heather embracing outside his auto shop. The story detailed everything: the financial fraud, the multiple affairs, the web of deception that had entangled several prominent families. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, all wanting to know if I'd seen the paper, if I was okay, if there was anything they could do. Heather's reaction was even more dramatic. She burst into the kitchen at 7:30, still in her robe, clutching a copy of the newspaper. "Jack, I can explain." "Can you?" I looked up from my coffee, meeting her eyes calmly. "Because I'd love to hear how you explain 8 months of adultery while I was overseas supporting our family. How did they get these photos? These private conversations? Does it matter?" "The truth is the truth, Heather." She collapsed into a chair, the newspaper falling from her trembling hands. "My career is over. The partners will never tolerate this kind of publicity." "Probably not. Jack, please. We can work through this, marriage counseling, whatever it takes. I made mistakes, but we can fix this." I studied my wife's face, seeing desperation where once there had been confidence. "What about Kyle? Are you going to work through your mistakes with him too?" "Kyle was a mistake. You're my husband, the father of my child. That has to count for something." It did count for something. Past tense. The phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Heather's office, probably calling to discuss her immediate termination. She let it go to voicemail. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to pack your things and leave." "I can't. This is my home too. Legally, adultery affects property division in Texas, especially when it can be proven that marital assets were used to support the affair." I slid a folder across the table. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, all funded by money I earned while you were playing house with Kyle. Heather opened the folder, her face growing paler with each page. "You've been planning this," she whispered, "just like you were planning to destroy me after the holidays. The difference is, I succeeded." "What about Mason?" "Mason stays with me. You can have supervised visitation once you get your life together." "You can't do this. I'm his mother." "You're an unemployed adulteress with no stable income or housing. I'm a decorated veteran with a clean record and the financial means to provide for my son. Any family court judge will see the obvious choice." The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd planned, had been turned against her. "Jack, please, I'm begging you." I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at our neighborhood. Normal houses with normal families, living normal lives unmarked by betrayal and revenge. You and Kyle made your choice 8 months ago. You decided I was expendable, that my feelings didn't matter, that my son would be better off with a replacement father. You counted on my decency, my willingness to do the right thing, even if it destroyed me. I turned back to face her. "But you miscalculated. I'm not the same naive man who left for overseas deployment. I'm someone else now, someone harder." "What happened to you over there?" "Nothing happened to me over there. Everything happened to me here, in my own home, with my own family. You and Kyle destroyed the man I used to be. This is who's left." Heather was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streams. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Yes, you did. You planned every detail, from the divorce papers to the custody arrangement to the financial settlement. You just never planned on getting caught." The front door opened, and Mason walked in from school. He stopped short when he saw his mother crying at the kitchen table and his father standing rigid by the window. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly. I knelt down to his eye level. "Mason, your mom is going to be staying somewhere else for a while. It's complicated grown-up stuff, but I want you to know that both of us love you very much." "Is it because of the newspaper? Kids at school were talking about it." "Smart kid. Too smart for his own good sometimes. Partly, yes, but mostly it's because your mom and I can't live together anymore. Sometimes that happens with married people. Where will she go? I looked at Heather, who was struggling to compose herself. I don't know yet, buddy, but she'll still be your mom, and you'll still see her regularly. Mason nodded solemnly, then walked over to hug Heather. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. So much. It was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her in days. That evening, Heather packed 2 suitcases and loaded them into her car. Kyle was nowhere to be found, probably dealing with his own legal and financial disasters. She would have to face the consequences of their affair alone. Where will you go? I asked as she prepared to leave. My sister's place in Houston, at least until I can figure out what comes next. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow. My attorney will contact you. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. Jack, for what it's worth, I really am sorry. So am I, Heather. Sorry that 12 years of marriage meant so little to you. Sorry that you were willing to destroy our family for a few months of excitement. Sorry that our son has to grow up knowing his mother chose another man over his father. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's the truth. I watched her drive away, tail lights disappearing into the November darkness. Mason stood beside me in the doorway, his small hand slipping into mine. Dad, are we going to be okay? I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of single parenthood settling onto my shoulders. Yeah, buddy, we're going to be just fine. It wasn't entirely true. There would be legal battles, custody hearings, financial complications, and the challenge of raising a son alone. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The lies were over. The betrayal was exposed. The people who had counted on my weakness had discovered my strength. I was no longer the naive, trusting fool who'd left for overseas deployment. I was a father protecting his son, a man who'd learned that sometimes the only way to save your family is to destroy it first. Kyle Martin lost his business, his reputation, and faced multiple lawsuits and criminal charges. The other marriages he'd helped destroy would never recover, and his name became synonymous with scandal in our small town. Heather's legal career was finished. No reputable firm would hire an attorney who'd been publicly exposed for adultery and professional misconduct. She would spend years rebuilding her life from scratch. As for me, I found work with a local construction company, honest work that kept me home every night with my son. The overseas money was gone, but Mason and I were building something more valuable, a relationship based on trust, presence, and unconditional love. Some people might call what I did cruel or excessive. They might argue that I should have taken the high road, handled things privately, protected the innocent parties who got caught in the crossfire. But those people never had their life systematically dismantled by the 2 people they trusted most. They never had to explain to their 10-year-old son why mommy doesn't live here anymore. They never had to rebuild their entire existence from the ashes of betrayal. I regret the collateral damage, the other families destroyed by Kyle's actions, the pain inflicted on innocent spouses and children. But I don't regret exposing the truth or protecting my son from people who viewed him as a pawn in their selfish games. Sometimes justice isn't pretty. Sometimes it's cold, calculated, and devastating to everyone involved. But sometimes it's the only thing that allows you to sleep at night. Mason and I are building a new life now, one based on honesty instead of deception, presence instead of absence, and love instead of manipulation. It's not the life I planned when I married Heather 15 years ago, but it's the life we have. And for the first time in months, that's enough. It's